Hey, good afternoon. What I'm going to show you right now, an instructional video on how to go about using your scissors for cutting. In particular, we want to be able to learn how to cut these curved lines correctly, okay, with some degree of skill, so we actually get what we're aiming for. We can even cut from the middle of a shape, and it's easy to do. See how I did it? We'll demonstrate that in a little bit. There's still a lot of potential for shapes in this small piece of scrap, so don't throw stuff away like this. This is big enough that you can still use it quite a bit. Notice how I sometimes decide to use the edges and corners of the chipboard, this is chipboard, and make that part of my shape. You can do that very easily. Now, one thing I want to show you is just simple straight cuts, multiple cuts coming together to make, say, this star right here. The first thing I'm going to do is come in here, cut around the star roughly, and block it out. Now, you notice I'm using very, very big scissors right now, and I'm not sure this is my favorite pair of scissors because they're long and sometimes the length of the blade gets in my way. But for right now, since I'm just doing straight cuts, it should be all right. These scissors, by the way, are pretty sharp, so be careful when you're cutting that you don't snip yourself. What I'm doing right now, you see how I'm supporting the scissors underneath with one of my fingers of my left hand? I'm positioning the paper underneath the blades in a way that I can push down and cut exactly the line I want, stopping exactly where I want. I'm going to turn the paper and my left hand is doing a lot of work. Again, see the scissors resting on my fingers beneath my hand? Again, straight cut, that piece falls out. So little by little, you can make shapes with multiple cuts. You just have to be careful to take the time to aim and then make the cut, okay? Now, I'm not going to cut through the stars, so these lines on the center are just going to disappear here in a moment. I'm going to show you what I mean in a little bit. I use marker. You probably would be using pencil when you're planning. So this star is just about done with multiple cuts, all of them coming in from the outside toward the inside, meeting where they need to meet, okay? So just like that, and the star is done. Not worrying at all about these original lines that I used for drawing the star to begin with, okay? Now, like I mentioned, you block, and then if you have a shape that happens to utilize the sides of the chipboard, great. That's just an easier way to avoid more cuts. Now, you notice right now I'm actually nibbling. When I cut a curve, now these were straight lines, but when I cut a curve, I do a lot of nibbling. So once again, as I open and close the scissors just a little bit, every time I open, I pull the chipboard into the next cut. So my left hand is gripping pretty tightly to the chipboard, and I'm pulling it back, applying pressure against the inside where the blades come together, and that gives me these controlled curved edges, all right? Let's try this guy right here. He looks pretty hard. Again, block him out. So far, these larger scissors are working, but it may be I'll decide that they're kind of cumbersome or big. I'm just going to block out, get rid of some of that excess. Now I'm going to use that nibble technique that I was showing you, and here we go. I'm going to nibble. Now there's another technique that you need to explore. As you see this left hand coming in to grip, and I'm holding tightly, you notice how the left hand can pull the paper through the cut. I'm actually closing the blade slowly as I pull the paper through, so it's a continual pressure downwards on the blades, very slow, as I pull the paper through, and that will allow me to make those controlled cuts, the ones that are otherwise kind of hard to make. Okay, that one's done. Coming here, that one's done. And coming around that corner, again, slow closure of the scissors while the paper, the chipboard in this case, moves underneath the cut, and the scissor blades gradually cut the shape of the line I need. Again, slow cut as I'm coming around that inside edge, slow cut as I force the paper into the blades as they cut downwards. See this inside corner? Get rid of it. Cut in there with a straight cut, let that piece drop out. It makes it a lot easier to get in here and continue on cutting. Now I continue with my nibbling. I always, when I release the paper with my left hand, because I'm no longer controlling the cut, I gotta stop cutting. So on the down cut, I'm still holding onto the paper with the scissors, but I'm not moving anything, I'm not cutting anything, okay? And that little piece is done. Let's check the back side, looks pretty clean and decent to me, all right? Now let me show you one of these cuts. Let's do this guy right here, this big fella. He's probably no more difficult than that one, but let's go ahead and block him out. Typically, he's in the middle of all this group, so I probably wouldn't have cut him first, but you can see me going in here roughly and blocking out. Got awful close there. And save the pieces you may still want to use. And let's get going. I'm going to go ahead and nibble and nibble. And every time I open the scissors, I pull the paper in again to the middle of the blades and continue cutting. So there's a lot of pressure on the paper pushing backward into the blade. Finish that cut, get rid of that scrap. Do this, cut that off, get rid of that scrap. I'm going to start slowly to nibble once again. Now at some point, nibbling may no longer do the job, so I'm going to have to switch to that different technique where I close the scissors slowly. So far, you can see how close I come with my thumb and my pointer finger to grab the paper and control its movement. Boy, I need to be careful where that thumb and pointer finger are for fear that I'm going to get there under the blade. But since I'm nibbling, my cuts are very small. Now here's a very tight inside curve. I'm going to close and turn at the same time. This is getting in the way, so I've got to rethink that. Let me come back out here again. Let me move that out of the way. This inside shape I don't really need. Now I'm going to come in from this direction. These big scissors may be causing a problem. They are really big and they're kind of getting in the way right now. So at any time you think to use small scissors, please do. In fact, I use the small scissors all the time. So here I go, nibble, 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 nibble. That feels better. Nibble, 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 nibble. And I'm just about done. Okay, see, that's done. A little rough on the inside edge there. Some of that I can clean up. Some of it I'm just not going to worry about. I know I can do better than that, all right? Now, again, guys, if you wanted to cut this hole out of this shape like a donut, you can do it very easily without a problem. Let's block this out. Some of these other shapes I still may want to keep, so I'm not throwing that away. Continue blocking to remove excess chipboard or paper. Do the same techniques with regular old construction paper. I'm going to nibble, and you can see I'm going around a big curve. You notice how my hands are moving to steer the paper and to steer the scissors both. You can move whichever arms you want to. The shoulders are involved. There's more nibbling, 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 and the outside is done. Okay, looks pretty good. Get rid of your scraps. To cut that middle portion out, watch, I'm just going to come in here, angle in, catch that inside curve, nibble around that. Even though it's a smaller turn, I can still just nibble away. These smaller scissors really aren't getting in the way of the cutting the way the big ones were. And whoops, yeah, we got that. That's not great. You see where that comes together. There's a little bit of a problem there. I was talking and not thinking. But otherwise, you can't really see where these pieces, where that line comes. So if I were to glue that down, I doubt you'd ever see how that got cut, okay? Except for that little mistake right there. Now, remember that you've got to practice cutting. It's not like it just comes naturally. You might have to pick up a pair of scissors and a bunch of scrap just to see if you can do it. You don't actually have to draw out your lines the way I do. You can just take your piece of scrap and you can start cutting. For example, I'm going to close the blade slowly right now. As I close the blade slowly, I'm going to make some very tight cuts. Watch, closing the blades and turning, closing in the blades and turning, slowly closing those blades and turning. And you can see that the cuts I made are very, very tight, and you wouldn't be able to do that unless you follow my technique, okay? Now, you try.
Please release all after-school activities.